On the night of January 8th, 2010, a gunshot shattered the stillness of a millionaire's home deep in the Costa Rican jungle. John Bender was discovered lifeless, with a gunshot wound to the head. His wife, Anne, claimed she had tried to stop him but couldn't in time, suggesting that he had taken his own life. However, the evidence raised serious questions. The odd angle of the bullet's trajectory, the gun in the wrong hand, and signs that pointed to a possible setup. Local authorities launched a prolonged legal battle. Anne Bender was acquitted twice, only to be convicted later. Let's dig deeper into this tangled case. John William Bender was born on January 18, 1966, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the second largest city in the state. He was the younger of two sons in a well-educated, financially secure family. His father was a highly respected attorney who worked for the Department of Justice, while his mother was a law professor. They made every effort to provide their sons with the best education and to help them realize their full potential. From an early age, John stood out. His parents noticed he was different from other children. He was exceptionally bright and absorbed new information almost instantly. His older brother later recalled that John had taught himself to read very early but kept it a secret from the adults because he enjoyed bedtime stories and feared they would stop reading to him if they knew he could do it himself. Even before starting school, John had a talent for mental math. During grocery trips, he would calculate the total cost of their purchases before they reached the checkout. He would also compare weights and quantities of identical items on the shelves, pointing out which options offered the best value. During his school years, John was considered a genius in math and science. He could perform complex calculations in his head and always gave the right answers. However, he faced significant social challenges. He had almost no friends and preferred reading over playing or interacting with peers. As a teenager, he avoided parties and birthday celebrations, and even forbade his parents from hosting such events for him. John wasn't confrontational, but his classmates openly disliked the strange, brooding boy who seemed to know everything about the world. By high school, he was attending lectures at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia and was already considered a promising nuclear physicist. Yet, realizing that this career path would likely be linked to weapons development, he decided to change his focus and enrolled at the Wharton School of Business, which is part of the same university. A genius, a millionaire, and a recluse. During his college years, young John often visited various casinos, consistently leaving with significant winnings. Thanks to his extraordinary skill with mental calculations and an impressive memory for numbers, it took him just a few rounds to understand how the games worked and predict winning combinations. As a result, he quickly became unwelcome at many gambling establishments. Around the same time, John caught the attention of several modeling agencies who offered him lucrative contracts. He was tall, athletic, well-groomed, and had striking dark hair paired with a brooding, mysterious look. He photographed exceptionally well, and for the next few years, he worked as a model. However, despite the income and opportunities this brought, he found no real enjoyment in it. John had no dreams of fame or celebrity status. Numbers were his true passion. After graduating, a friend invited him to visit the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, and there John found his calling. The brilliant mathematician was able to use his skills to make a fortune trading options. He developed his own method, one that had never been used before, and by the age of 25, he was making tens of millions of dollars, becoming one of the top traders. A few years later, he was invited to work on Wall Street, where he quickly became a well-known figure. By the time he turned 30, John was managing several major funds and attracting substantial investments. His personal fortune has grown to $200 million. Despite his success and the recognition he received, people still considered John to be extremely eccentric and withdrawn. His mood swings were unpredictable. One moment he would laugh wholeheartedly, the next he'd be overwhelmed by anger, and minutes later he might seem on the verge of tears. These rapid shifts had a clinical explanation. John was diagnosed with bipolar disorder during his teenage years. Later on, he developed obsessive-compulsive tendencies as well. Yet, he adamantly refused to take any prescribed medication for his conditions. In the mid-90s, the young millionaire purchased a large countryside home in a heavily wooded area. He adopted a dozen cats and dogs and cherished spending time there in solitude, surrounded by his pets. When people asked him why he was so attached to animals, John would simply reply, "Because they don't talk or annoy me." Love at first sight and a shared diagnosis. As mentioned earlier, our main character had always been a striking and well-built young man who never failed to catch the attention of women. Even in his youth, girls would seek him out, but he remained indifferent to their advances. When John became a millionaire, he turned into one of the most eligible bachelors around, with women practically competing for his attention, hoping to win over this prize catch. Yet none of their efforts made a difference. Everything changed in 1998 when John met a delicate and captivating brunette named Ann Patton at a social event. From the moment he saw her, he was completely smitten. Ann worked as a fashion model, exuding charm and beauty, yet she was reserved and kept her distance from people, preferring solitude. Ann was originally from Brazil, the only child of a wealthy banker. In her teenage years, she had decided to move to the United States to pursue a modeling career. Luck was on her side. She quickly signed a lucrative contract with a renowned agency and gained popularity almost overnight. It's worth noting that Ann had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder back in high school, a condition that profoundly affected her life. Unlike John, however, she took her prescribed medications, although she often ended up taking higher doses than recommended, especially during intense episodes. It was during one of these difficult periods that she met her future husband. John noticed the stunning woman sitting alone, her hands trembling and her eyes nervously scanning the room. Concerned, he approached her and offered a glass of water. Anne, embarrassed, explained that she had taken a large dose of lithium, a medication commonly used to manage bipolar disorder, and that the shaking was a side effect. Anne, too, fell in love with John at first sight. She immediately told him about her diagnosis and apologized in advance for any unusual behavior. This unexpected romance blossomed quickly, and within just a week of meeting, John proposed. Anne instantly accepted, later saying that they saw a reflection of themselves in each other. Escape from society and civilization. In 1999, the couple officially tied the knot. They seemed like the perfect match. Young, attractive, successful, with a future that appeared full of promise. However, in 2000, John suffered an unexpected stroke. Thanks to excellent and timely medical care, he recovered quickly, but the experience led him to make a life-changing decision: to leave his stressful career behind, focus on his health, and find a secluded place to live. After giving it some thought, John and his wife discovered a beautiful plot of land in the mountains of Costa Rica, surrounded by lush tropical nature, complete with stunning jungles, waterfalls, rare plants, wildlife, and exotic birds. Both of them loved animals and cherished their privacy, so they came up with an ambitious idea: to build a dream home deep in the wilderness, far from civilization, and establish a private nature reserve there. They were drawn to a remote spot on a high mountain, where untouched wilderness stretched as far as the eye could see. The property spanned nearly 5,000 acres at an elevation of 2,250 feet above sea level. It was located in the southwestern part of Costa Rica near the coast, offering breathtaking ocean views. For hundreds of miles around, there were only a few scattered huts where local farmers grew cacao. There was no infrastructure, not even proper roads, only dirt paths that heavy rain frequently washed away. The couple purchased the land for $10 million, and in 2000, they began a massive construction project that lasted 4 years and drew plenty of attention. It became one of the most extraordinary and ambitious builds in the country. John had completely left his Wall Street career to personally oversee the project. Top architects were brought in to execute the unique and extravagant vision with precision. A dream home in their own paradise. By 2004, construction was complete, and the couple named their estate Boracay after a rare and striking tropical plant. The property featured 4 separate buildings, a swimming pool, an artificial pond, and even a helicopter landing pad. At the heart of it all, on the highest point of the land, stood their Crystal Castle, a 4-story cone-shaped structure spanning over 50,000 square feet. The building had no solid walls, only panoramic windows and special screens designed to keep out pesky insects. But most importantly, this wasn't just an extravagant family home for the couple. It was the headquarters of a self-established tropical wildlife reserve and a sanctuary for injured animals and birds. The Benders even hired armed guards to patrol the property, keeping an eye out for poachers who considered the land their personal hunting grounds. The sanctuary they built employed several veterinarians and caretakers who looked after weak, injured, and rescued wildlife. Monkeys, parrots, and sloths roamed freely through the couple's home, and around the pond, rare plants and various types of orchids flourished. The entire fourth floor was dedicated to the couple's bedroom, which stood at the highest point of the estate, approximately 2,300 feet above sea level. From there, you could witness breathtaking sunrises and sunsets, gaze at the surrounding mountains and ocean, listen to the rain, and be enveloped by the sounds of birds and insects. Anne often said that this place made her feel like she was floating among the clouds, completely immersed in nature. Throughout the house, the couple had placed numerous Tiffany-stained glass lamps, which they adored and collected. In total, they had over 400 unique pieces, sourced from all over the world. The third floor was John's bright and spacious home office, where he continued trading on the stock market remotely. Several powerful satellite dishes ensured he had an uninterrupted connection to the outside world. The couple preferred to communicate with colleagues, family, and their few close friends mainly through email. On the second floor, the house featured a kitchen, a bar, and a dining area. This was where the couple frequently enjoyed romantic evenings. They would savor delicious meals and drinks while taking in the ocean view from their glass-walled balcony, engaging in quiet conversations, sometimes listening to classical music and dreaming about their future together. Unfriendly locals. At first glance, it seemed like the couple was living in paradise. Their home was well protected, and they could fully dedicate themselves to their passion for rescuing animals and preserving nature. Moreover, the construction and upkeep of their home, as well as the surrounding land, provided dozens of jobs for the local community and gave a significant boost to the area's economy. The Benders were quite literally pouring money into the region, sparing no expense on the project, building materials or wages for the workers. Nevertheless, not all Costa Ricans were happy about these wealthy foreigners who seemed to throw money around, reshaping everything to their liking. The most upset and resentful were the locals who didn't secure jobs in the Benders' home or on their estate. But the most dangerous enemies the American couple made were, of course, the poachers who had been driven off the land where they used to hunt and capture rare animals, later selling them on the illegal market. The trouble began in earnest in the spring of 2004, less than a year after the couple moved into their dream home. One day, as they were driving their SUV back up the steep mountain road to their property, their path was suddenly blocked by an unmarked vehicle. A group of armed men got out and ordered the couple to stop and exit their car. The strangers claimed to be police officers but failed to show any identification. They acted aggressively and made thinly veiled threats about what would happen if the couple didn't comply. They forced John into their vehicle, while a terrified Anne was told to drive home. Later that evening, John returned to their residence, this time with a court summons. It turned out the entire roadside ambush had been orchestrated by a former business associate who accused John Bender of using tax loopholes in Costa Rica to evade payments. And to be fair, these claims weren't entirely false. John had indeed set up a company under a trusted associate's name to protect his assets. Following this harrowing event, the couple retreated to a quiet province in Canada for several months. Anne suffered from panic attacks, worsening depression, and severe episodes related to her bipolar disorder. When they eventually returned to Costa Rica, John fortified the security around their home and the surrounding estate, hiring a private armed security team. He also acquired multiple firearms, which he kept with him at all times. Anne, however, struggled to recover. Her mental health deteriorated into severe bipolar psychosis, and she ultimately ended up hospitalized, emaciated, and extremely weak. She had dropped to just 88 pounds and was unable to get out of bed, appearing to be on the brink of death. John blamed himself for everything, and his own mental well-being suffered deeply as a result. In the middle of 2005, another frightening incident occurred. An armed intruder breached the sanctuary grounds and opened fire, injuring one of the security guards. Anne suffered a severe breakdown during this ordeal, one that nearly cost her her life. The couple then decided to get away again, spending 4 months in Australia and then traveling to New Zealand to recover and seek peace of mind. By the spring of 2006, they returned to their Costa Rican estate and even hosted a team of international biologists. The scientists discovered several new plant species on the couple's land, with one of them named in honor of the estate and its owners. Worsening health issues. After some time, it seemed like all the legal battles were finally settled, and the couple could live their lives in peace. In 2007, John established a trust fund in Costa Rica, placing most of his savings there to protect them, and appointed his attorney, Juan Diaz Alvarez, as the trustee. The next few years were relatively calm, but underlying mental health struggles continued to worsen for both of them. As mentioned earlier, John had always refused to take his prescribed medication. He kept the pills at home, sometimes laying them out in front of himself, saying that one day he might take them all at once, but then he would just put the bottles and blister packs back in the drawer. His wife, on the other hand, was increasing her medication doses, constantly trying to find relief. In 2008, Anne was diagnosed with a severe and debilitating illness, Lyme disease. The infection was relentless, and over time, it made it increasingly difficult for her to move. She lost a significant amount of weight, becoming dangerously underweight. Around the same time, a rare bird the couple had been nursing back to health passed away, adding to the emotional strain on both of them. On top of everything, tensions with the local community were getting worse. Despite the fact that the Benders had brought electricity, running water, and roads to an area that had never had such infrastructure, many Costa Ricans felt resentment. They viewed the couple as outsiders, unfairly taking over their land to build a massive estate. John spiraled into a deep and lasting depression but continued to refuse any treatment or therapy. He blamed himself for Anne's illness, the death of the bird, and the escalating issues with the locals. He also began to experience increasingly intrusive thoughts about ending his own life, which he shared with Anne. Anne's condition continued to deteriorate, both physically and mentally. She could hardly get out of bed and grew weaker by the day. At one point, John became convinced that the local water held healing properties and believed it could save Anne. He began administering intramuscular and subcutaneous injections of the water, which only caused painful ulcers and abscesses. Anne later recalled that she never resisted this treatment because she trusted John so much that she would have taken poison from his hands if he offered it. At the same time, she was battling to keep him from acting on his dark thoughts of self-harm. One day, while she was hospitalized, John sent her a message saying he couldn't bear to live anymore and expressed a desire to harm others and then himself. Death by crime or self-inflicted wound. On the night of January 8th, 2010, John died from a gunshot wound to the head inflicted by his own firearm. Yet the circumstances surrounding his death appeared highly suspicious, and the account provided by his widow, Anne, raised even more questions. According to Anne, she woke up around midnight to hear John mumbling. In the dim light, she saw him lying with his back to her, pressing a gun to his head. Panicked, she grabbed his hand and tried to pull the weapon away, but in that split second, the gun went off. John died instantly. In a state of shock, Anne used a radio to call for security, who in turn contacted the local authorities and emergency services. It was clear that medical assistance would be of no use. When officers arrived, they found Anne sobbing beside her husband's body, repeating that she had tried to stop him but failed. She claimed he had taken his own life. But the scene left investigators with many doubts. John's body lay on the bed, surrounded by a pool of blood. The bullet that ended his life had entered the lower back of his skull on the right side and exited through his left eye. The bullet's path seemed odd, but even more troubling was the fact that John was left-handed, yet the gun was found in his right hand. The shell casing was discovered far from the headboard, as if the shot had come from an angle above and to the side, and the firearm itself ended up near his left hand. The overall scene resembled a poorly executed setup. Anne insisted she was in such a state of shock that she couldn't recall if she had moved anything or accidentally altered the scene. Still, it must be noted that local law enforcement did not handle the case with the attention it deserved. Instead of securing the area and carefully documenting the evidence, officers wandered around the home like tourists, marveling at the elaborate decor, stained glass Tiffany lamps, and even trying on John's collection of designer sunglasses. Their curiosity was also piqued by the many gemstones displayed in illuminated glass cases. Most of these gems had reportedly been brought into the country illegally, and the centerpiece of the collection was a massive pink diamond valued at nearly $2.5 million. Anne herself was in such a dire condition that she required immediate hospitalization. She was so emaciated and frail that she could barely walk, weighing less than 88 pounds, and doctors feared for her life. She remained in the hospital for nearly 6 months and, even after her release, couldn't bring herself to return to the home where the tragedy had unfolded. Her attorneys assured her she wouldn't face charges, given her fragile physical and mental state at the time of John's death. However, it later emerged that these lawyers had never once officially declared her innocence, while the prosecutor continued to insist that she was responsible for the crime. 3 trials, a conviction, and an escape from the country. In August 2011, Anne Bender was arrested on charges of first-degree murder and taken into custody. The man who pretended to defend her, the head of John's trust fund and his so-called trusted associate, was actually working to ensure Anne ended up behind bars. Juan Diaz Alvarez had full control of the trust's finances and kept Anne from accessing the funds. He cut off support for the nature reserve, shut down the animal sanctuary, and essentially abandoned the security measures, allowing poachers to return and wreak havoc in the forests. Anne managed to hire a team of experienced attorneys and presented evidence in court showing that Alvarez had embezzled millions of dollars from the trust, investing it in real estate and a horse farm. However, this revelation didn't clear her of the charges related to her husband's death and the alleged smuggling of precious gemstones. Most of the evidence found at the scene of John's death seemed to point toward Anne. It looked as though she had shot her husband while he was sleeping, and then tried to stage the incident as a case of self-inflicted harm. Yet Anne had no apparent motive to harm the man she loved. The prosecution argued that Anne had gotten rid of her husband and was planning to flee the country with the gemstones, which they claimed had been brought in illegally. Anne, however, was able to provide all the necessary paperwork to prove the stones had been lawfully acquired and imported. Crucially, there was no undeniable forensic evidence tying Anne to the shooting, and combined with the lack of motive, this led to her acquittal in the spring of 2013. At that time, it appeared she had also won her case against Alvarez, who was arrested and had his assets seized. But by the fall of the same year, Anne was arrested again after the prosecutor filed an appeal with a higher court. In 2014, she was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 22 years in prison. After serving nearly 10 months, Anne and her legal team filed another appeal, and once again, she was acquitted. She was released in late 2015 and quickly left Costa Rica, returning to the United States. Once back, she learned that a new legal case was being prepared against her for the same crime. Despite an extradition treaty between the 2 countries, it seemed unlikely that an American citizen would be handed over for a case that had already been tried 3 times with 2 acquittals.